Antone Routhy original farm. He built this farm, bought it from C.O. Gilfillan in about 1908, 1909. And built that house from Sears Roebuck catalog. And my father and our family moved out 7 after my grandfather passed away. And we lived here until the farm was sold in about 1965 to Jerome Green, and the Green family are living on this property now. Right in front of you here to the left was about 50 apple trees, and they would string down into this area down here as well. And there was a chicken house, big hog barn, granaries. All those buildings are now gone, except for the house and the garage. There was a big rock pile right down here, nearby where that corner of that grove. And that's where my brother Don and Chuck were playing around with 22 rifles shooting into the rocks. And my mother came out to see what was going on, and she had a heart attack because the boys were shooting the rock and bullets ricocheting off the rocks, and she put a stop to it. And right up here on the right is the Methodist Church. This is the church that your mother grew up in. It was located down by the courthouse before, and then was rebuilt out here. But she and her mother and her father, they were members of that church. Coming up on the left is the house that Everett and Gladys lived in. It's that little cream-colored house there on the left. And after they fired out on his farm, we came out here and drove around with them for 2 weeks while they were grieving that loss of everything on their farm. And we bought that little house there for them with some insurance money. And that's where they lived until they both died. This is the house where I was born, Floyd was born, and a number of my brothers were born in this house. And we lived here. You walk in the door, and immediate to the right was the bedroom where my father and mother lived. On the left side was the living room and the dining room. When you go upstairs, there was a room on the left side that about 4 of us slept in one bedroom. It's a very small house. This garage was not attached at that time. That came after I moved away. And after your mother and I were married and came back from the service, I moved in that house and remodeled it and tore out the glass and the sheetrock and the square nails and put the sheetrock in and remodeled the inside of it. This is the German Lutheran Church in Redwood Falls, where my mother was a member for many years, up until the time that she died. This is where the funeral was. This German Lutheran Church used to be over next to the house where I was born. And the pastor for many years was Reverend Nicholas. It's not right. That's not exactly. I'm sorry. It was Burkles. Reverend Burkles. And he had 2 daughters that were just very wonderful friends of my mother. And on her 90th birthday or 85th birthday was in the basement of this church, and they came to see her. Frank Dornfeld house, and Frank and mother were married. can't remember exactly the day. Very small house, and he was a carpenter and a woodworker, and he had that house very well constructed. It's small, and we used to hold family get-togethers there. You can't believe. We were all over the house and in the yard. And the auto dairy used to be right back here. We'd go over there for ice cream cones. The Ramsey Park. It used to be a state park, and they gave it up and turned it over to the city of Redwood Falls. And this is the entrance. And we're coming up to an area right off to the left here is where the probably the first Ralphie family picnic was held, and my mother and Floyd and Leona organized the first one, and we've had 46 picnics annually since that time. And then here is where the Walter Ralphie, Chris Ralphie, Oscar Ralphie, and Anton Ralphie gang, who used to scrap and not talk to each other, got together at the behest of my mother, and we have been a cohesive family ever since.
Now, was that shelter, or the original shelter?
No, that's not.
Probably not.
That was across the road. Now here is the entrance to the Ramsey Falls. I don't know if you can drive up there anymore. You might be able to. But Woodford. There's the Woodford picnic. Will be here. I think you might be able to drive up there to the Ramsey Falls. You want a picture of the falls?
Sure.
We'll take a look and see what it's like. This is where your mother and I were courting, down here in the park. We'd come down to the park, and we'd sit by the falls, and I carved hers and my initials on the fence right here by where this car is, and then we can get out and walk down to the Ramsey Falls. This fence has been replaced. That was originally just a wire wooden post fence, and right about in there I carved my initials.
Good, how are you?
How you doing?
Hello.
Hey, how you doing?
You can shoot right here. This is the Ramsey Falls, and your mother and I used to come down here and stand at this location, and I crawled all over the rocks down there. And right up over the hill is a Mann family farm. About up over that hill and about 2 miles. And from down in the park, there used to be a path, a road up over that hill, and we could go over to the farm about half a mile away. Over here to the left was a big white house, and it was where Bernice Schmeckel lived. Her dad was the caregiver of the park. She was probably one of my most favorite high school classmates, other than your mother. But she was very happy-go-lucky, a big girl, and lots of fun to be around. And she died at an early age. Felt very bad about that.
We're now driving down toward the campgrounds and the zoo. We've had a few reunions down here.
These sharp turns here gets us down to the creek, the Ramsey Creek. Then that flows into the Redwood River, which flows into the Minnesota River. And now we're coming down to go across the bridge of this park, and in the spring the water will get up and overflow this bridge almost every year. And it seldom is dry. And off to the right now you'll see the zoo. We'll be coming around the curve here a little bit. But notice the wonderful display of trees in this park, and that's all natural growth. And now we're going across this creek. It's pretty benign right at the moment, but it still has a good flow of water. They maintain some wildlife here, some ducks, geese, goats. And there's a buffalo in here. Yep. These buffalo are maintained in a relatively wild state. You notice that they're not well fed, but then buffalo back in the early days were not either. They had to depend on grass for their livelihood. To the main park, the Paul Osselson Lower Park Shelter area, and this has been the site location of many of our family reunions. We've played softball right out in this field probably a half dozen times over the years. And straight across there is a big campground where we can pull in with a trailer and enjoy a night before the reunion, and can be just lots of fun. But we always ended up here in this main shelter area here where we would get together for a picnic together. And your mother and I spent many times down here for picnics and camping with you little guys, or where you could walk over there and wade around in the river and just have fun. Many impromptu picnics down here in the park. Golf club, and my grandfather, Gustav Schaefer, was the groundskeeper here when I was just a little tyke, about 7, 8 years old. And he would take me out here when he was mowing the fairways and hold me on his lap, and we'd drive down there with maybe 3 or 4 more, just blazing and rolling. And I thought I was at the end of the world. It was just wonderful. I played this course many times, and sometimes successfully. You go down on hole number 2, which is about 500 yards down with the bluff on the right side, where my father and mother are buried, and it's also the cemetery where your grandmother and Harold and Gladys Mann They are also buried in the cemetery. I can find Rousey Cemetery. I think I see it from here. First time I've seen that. That's Leona will be buried here. Willard man is Helen's grandfather. Helen G. Mann. This is your mother's aunt. She was a school teacher in St. Paul for 50 years. And she's well-traveled, well-educated. And she gave Helen some money and gave her a piano. This is Clarence Mann. Clarence gave me my first loan to put a down payment on a house in St. Paul. And he said it was the best investment he ever made. He made 3% interest on his money. And I kept paying him back, and he didn't want me to pay him back. He says, I'm making more money if you don't pay me back than I am on all my other people that I lend money to. He said, Hal man, oh yeah, 1992, 1966. I can't remember those dates.
But I have Gladys's last diary.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Somebody has the Bible that she all marked up. I don't know who has that.
But how she talks about Christmas Eve and how it's really difficult for her.
Yeah.
'Cause that's when Harold passed away.
One of a kind. You never could do anything for her. We'd go out there to clean windows, and I'd be outside cleaning on the ladder doing windows. She'd be inside with a dirty old rag wiping the windows, trying to get her, trying to be helpful. And when we left the house, she always had a ton of questions because she just hated to see us leave, so she kept bringing up one thing after another. And I taught her how to keep a checkbook. She never had a checkbook straight.
Okay.
We're coming up to my grandmother's house right here on the right corner. This house is where they retired from a farm in Renville County and lived here. And I parked my car right here and to go to the school that was built right across the street. This was the original elementary and high school. and all the way up to that corner, and was torn down and built. And I went to school there. And after high school, and I went in the service, and I came back from the service. I lived upstairs over my grandmother's house right here for a period of time. Helen and I lived up there. And I was married in 1944 in November. And I spent my honeymoon night in that house, in the living room next to the piano. And then the next day, I got on a train, and we went on a train from Redwood Falls past our farm to Mankato, and I enlisted in the Navy. And that's the Redwood Falls Library, and that was given by C.O. Gilthorne, one of his contributions of libraries all over Redwood County. That's the courthouse over there, and I worked in that courthouse when I got back out of service in 1946 until about 1948. I was right down in the basement, right out where those windows are down there. And the old Methodist church was right on this corner, and this was where your mother and I were married. Right on the left there. That was the old Methodist church, and we were married there. And after that, we started a group here called the Methodals, and they were young married couples, and we started that group, and it is still going through.
Take a left here?
Yeah.
Isn't this the original Main Street?
This is original Main Street. That building there in the corner used to be J.C. Penney, and both Tom and Josie worked there, and that's where they met, and I don't know what they did in the back rooms. And your mother, my grandmother, my mother, this used to be the telephone building right there, the brick building right there. And she was a telephone operator here in Redwood Falls back in those early days, before she was married. Just to kid her about when she was going with my dad, that she was a telephone operator, and so if anything came up, she would take it down.
That's a joke. I'm laughing. I got one out of you finally.
Did you buy Harold Gladys's house? That bottle shop was the old post office. We're leaving North Redwood and going west toward Harold and Gladys's farm in Honor Township.
The Gladys and Harold Mann farmstead is about a quarter mile. You're on.
This is the Harold and Gladys Mann farm here in Honor Township, and we're at the driveway, what used to be the road up to the farmstead, just straight north of here, about a quarter of a mile. And there was a house, and a chicken house, and a barn, and a garage located on that property. On Thanksgiving Day, they went to play cards with some friends, and late afternoon they came home. And in the meantime, the house had started on fire, and the direction was such that it blew the wind down the hill to the Minnesota River, and they drove in the yard, and there was no house. And they couldn't believe what they saw. They just automatically drove right on by the house, down through the fence into the barnyard, before they stopped and realized that their house was gone. There was nothing left of the house except one one cup that was unbroken, and I have that. This was later sold to a gentleman who sold it to the Department of Natural Resources for a wildlife preserve. And they grow corn and beans on this property, do not harvest it, and there is a hunting season for a selected number of days. Other than that, it's a wildlife preserve area. Richard Sears Memorial Park. This is in North Redwood, and Sears was a train station operator here, and he would get misplaced merchandise and unsold material that he would gather, and he started merchandising it out of here, and then he developed a catalog that he mailed out that advertised what he had here, and that's the start of Sears Roebuck. This is the Gilfillan Farm and Museum in Paxton Township. It was part of a development by C.O. Gilfillan, who acquired about 26 or 27 farms out in this area, and sited his property here on this railroad siding. And right over to your right is the location of Farm Fest. It's held every year in the state of Minnesota. Demonstrates new technology and up-to-date farming methods, and it's kind of a celebration of agriculture in the Midwest. And behind me over on this side over here is the manager's home. My high school classmate Norman and Marlene Ramey live in that house, and they own the farm across the highway here. And round on then this row of trees is the Gilfillan mansion and the approach. The roadway up to the mansion is now closed, but it was the main entrance to the Gilfillan estates at that time. And the office house is right here a little bit to the right, but we'll drive up and you'll be able to see that house, and you can tour through there. In 1945, I and all my 5 brothers were standing on this roadway with my mother starched white shirts on, and the county agent taking a picture of all 6 of us boys in 4-H. I have a historical book on the history of the Gilfillan, C.O. Gilfillan estates, and much too detailed from here. This is the office, and they do give tours of that estate. And right in front of us now is quite a large camping area. I've camped here probably 3 or 4 different times, and we have enjoyed it. And there's water and electricity, and right straight ahead is where the museum is located. This is the inside of these buildings are all manner of artifacts and legacy items from the era of agriculture and family life in this southwestern Minnesota area. This barn here has a lot of the model toys that we used to play with when we were children. And this is the Farm Fest demonstration area. You got it on?
Yes.
Now in front of, on your left here, Mike, where you're pointing right now, is the location of the second International Ralphie Reunion here in Gilfillan. We were here and we held our reunion dinner right in this building, right across the way, and it was threatening to storms and tornadoes all around, so something going on there right now. And that's where my friend Norman and Marlene Ramey live. They have now retired. You ready? This is the Bethany Lutheran Church here at Gilfillan. It is an American-Danish church, and the services here are held in English and in Danish every Sunday. It's a very relatively small congregation, and the residents and the members of that church you would recognize by looking through the cemetery. They're practically all Danes or Europeans. You notice the names all spelled E-N, Hansen, Jensen, Fixen. There's a Schumacher, that must be German. Baseball, that's Danish. Peterson. And now we come to Ralphie. And why that's not E-N, I really have no explanation. That is the inscription on this marker, and we have it advertised. We have it translated in one of the books. And this is where Dortinus Ralphie was buried in 1937. And over here is Johan. Died in 1920. They immigrated from Denmark in 1892, and Johan never did learn to speak English and was quite unhappy here in the United States. This is the location. Knut Ralphie was one of the sons. Was born in 1893, shortly after they arrived here, and died, I think, from pneumonia when he was fairly young. And then over here is my uncle Oscar and Jesse. Oscar came from Denmark with my grandfather and grandmother in 1892, and then here is Chris and Helen. Chris was born here, born in 1896, after they had arrived here in the United States. My father, Walter, was born in 1887, and he is in a cemetery in Redwood Falls. My uncle Anton came over in 1892 and is somewhat younger than my dad, and I don't remember when he died.